Hey YouTube, welcome back to the BladesIIB shop for another project video. Obviously y'all get to be the judge, but I think this is probably the most interesting, coolest project that I've had to do in the shop here so far. So what we have today is a customer has a RC jet engine. We'll show you that here in just a moment, and he wants to mount that on a scooter. Don't know anything. I used to fly RC helicopters, but I don't know anything about RC jet engines, so customer fully responsible for all that. My expertise is just in making some of the brackets, making some of the hardware to be able to mount this together, doing a little bit of the fabrication with it. That's what we're going to be looking at doing. For those of you subscribed to the channel, hey, I sure appreciate your subscription. And if you haven't had a chance to subscribe to the channel yet, I'd sure appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button, and we'll see more project videos. You'll know when that next one gets released. But let's go ahead and turn this camera around and talk through a little bit of this project, and I'll let you know what my thoughts are so far. This is definitely one of a kind, unique, so we'll be making up a lot of stuff as we go along on this one, so to speak. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got laid out here. Alright, so still working on getting that Tormach 1100MX put together. So this is the enclosure box that we're on top of here. So we've still got a few things around the shop, but time to take a break from that for a bit and get working on this. So here is the scooter. We've got a Razor scooter. It used to be a battery powered one, so we've got a tray in here. We're going to be able to put some of the electronics. Right now my plan is we're going to mount most of this off of the back right here. So I've got a cardboard cutout. We'll take some time to shape and design that a little bit. And then ultimately we'll replace that piece of cardboard with this piece of 3/8 aluminum right here. So we'll contour this around a little bit to clean it up and get that looking nice. We're going to add at least one more hole in here to get that securely mounted onto this bracket. And then onto that 3/8 plate, we're going to put some risers up on that. And those risers will be a lot like what we have going on over here with this current mount for this jet. So we'll put the risers up on that aluminum plate, and then we'll have a place to bolt the jet to, and it'll keep it up off the ground. Should get it far enough off the back. We're going to take and modify this piece a little bit. Right now this bolts on right here, so we're going to shift that back a little bit so that it bolts on to our plate further out of the way. So we'll make sure we give ourselves enough room to mount that, get that bolted in place. So I may stick that piece of aluminum just a little bit further out back there to make sure I've got something to bolt to. Got to work on that a little bit. And then I've got some other aluminum, and I'll mount that inside of this battery tray. So my plan is to put some runners that way. We'll drill in from the outside, tap this plate, and that way I've got some strips of aluminum in there. And that's what I'll be able to use to mount a lot of these electrical pieces, the filter, some batteries, have something in there to be able to bolt to be able to mount all that electrical hardware. A lot of this wiring, going to run that out the back of the box up through here. Probably use a piece of flexible conduit just to give that wiring some protection from the elements and anything else. So we'll make sure we've got a little bit of protection for that, and come up somewhere through the back of our plate, making sure we're staying away from that wheel. So that is the overall plan, but primarily we're going to mount this jet off the back, and then the other piece I need to make is a mount for this screen. So I've got enough of this material here, this extra 2-inch, so that's going to be work for the screen. So we need to make some mounting brackets for the back of that, and that's going to mount up on the handlebars of the scooter, which are out of frame right now. You can't see those. So that's kind of the project. Again, the customer said that this has about 40 pounds of thrust. He seems to think it'll get that scooter up to about 30 miles an hour or so. Sounds pretty interesting, and I guess we'll have a chance to see that run when it all gets together. But for right now, we're going to be making some hardware, making some brackets to get that mounted on there. So let's go ahead and start marking up that piece of cardboard, get that cut, and then we'll get this in the mill. We'll get some holes drilled, we'll get this block cut in half, and we'll start making our risers. We've got some fabricating to do. Let's get to work. This was one of those projects where it seemed like there was so many different things to do, almost didn't know where to start, so just sort of jump in and start drawing some lines, start marking up the cardboard. Just have to start doing something, and then eventually it begins to come together and fall into place. All right, I think that'll work. So I've got a piece of plastic coming up on the side. We shouldn't lose any strength. I'll get in there and I will cut that out. Should give me about an inch or so back there to mount to my piece of aluminum. I'm gonna make sure I stick it an inch in behind. So that should kind of get me right to the back of this plate. I'm gonna extend the piece of aluminum another inch past that. So I'll be able to drop a couple of screws in there and just drill and tap right into that aluminum and get that secured onto there. So that should be good. We'll get that piece modified. So now we need to get a hole in here, and let's kind of center up our cardboard and see what this is going to look like and start shaping our piece so that it's going to go an inch back and sort of what that's going to look like to get up here. Looking at this jet, we really only need to be closer to 7 inches wide. And if we go right at 7 inches wide and we stick our 1-inch pieces on there, that's going to give us, I think we'll go a little more than that. We'll go 7 1/4, and that should just about center them up in there. Not quite centered, but close. So we're going to go 7 1/4 wide. Right now our piece is about 8 inches wide, so we'll be taking a little bit off of that. So let me trim up our piece of cardboard to match, know what we're working from. So prototyping is a lot of fun. You get to be innovative, creative, come up with things for the first time, but it's also really challenging. You're working with material still. You don't want to waste a lot of this aluminum that you ordered. So I find working with cardboard paper, that works pretty well for me. I'm getting a little bit better at Fusion 360, but to try to draw up this whole scooter and all of these parts, that was more than I wanted to tackle in Fusion at this point. So using a little bit of cardboard paper, trying to scratch some of it out, that's what I found to be most effective, and try to minimize any wastage of materials. And thankfully it came together pretty well. You do want to make sure you've got a pretty good picture somewhere in your head or scratched out on paper though, just to, you know, it's like playing chess. You've got to start thinking 4 or 5 moves ahead and try not to run yourself into a corner or into something that you're not going to be able to get back out of. Again, you don't want to have to remake parts. It's time consuming and can get costly if you're wasting too much material. So cardboard's cheap and pretty easy and fast to work with as well. Yeah, I'm glad I paused to grab a piece of wood right here, because even that piece of wood, my drill went pretty far into it and I would have gone right through that tire, which I don't want to do that. Already has a flat on the front that we're going to have to fix later. Did not need to make a flat on the back. Bandsaw was cutting nice and accurate on these pieces. Makes them nice and easy to mill down afterwards. So I keep my bandsaw tucked away behind my lathe, so it's a little bit hard to get to. So when I do pull it out, I try to cut all my pieces at one time. I always save a lot of time if you can minimize on setups. Well, we're truly just making stuff up here. I had a pretty good picture in my head of how I thought this was going to go together. So this has got the plastic with a little piece of aluminum sort of glued, mounted on top. And after I cut through that, it wanted to pull apart a little bit and separate. So I just grabbed some of that black Permatex gasket maker silicone and used that partly to glue it back together, but also wanted to cover up the sharp edge on that piece of aluminum there. And it turned out pretty well. The customer later, he ends up putting some black sticky on top of that razor deck there, and it goes really well with that black silicone that I put on there. So that worked pretty well to glue it back together and give it a protective edge. All right, these two pieces fit in here nice. So we'll come in from the side with some bolts and some big washers on that plastic to make sure they don't punch through. We'll drill and tap this and just hold those over there, and then we'll be able to mount any of the electronics that we need to onto those two plates. Keep them nicely under the box. That should work pretty well. Brake still works. Well, there's some pieces cut for today. We'll get on the mill and we'll start milling out that big piece. Cut that to shape on the bandsaw afterwards. Get the holes drilled in that, and then we'll drill and tap some holes in those blocks, get them on there, and then drill and tap the top side so that we can get that jet mounted on there. Good productive start for now. All right, I got our first piece in here. We're ready to get this cut. So I'm gonna go ahead and clamp it down. I've got it lifted up enough that I'll be able to drill through it. Gonna clamp it back here, dial in this front edge. I already checked the plate. It's square enough for what we're doing. So we'll dial in that front edge, make sure I've got it on here nice and straight. I'll kind of use this back edge to get us close. Get that clamp down. We'll find our edge over here on this corner, and then we'll come across our 7 1/4 inches for width, and I'll just buzz down there with a little 1/4 inch end end mill just to make our cut, and then we'll just be cutting with a bandsaw to make that radius in there. So we'll get that cut done, and then we're going to punch our 4 holes where the riser blocks are going to mount. And I don't have enough travel to get all the way over here to drill these other 3 holes and to do that. So we'll get that done, we'll get it cut to width, we'll get our 4 holes drilled, and then we'll pick it up, turn it around, clamp it back down, and we'll use that 1/4 inch end mill again to cut this width. We'll get that set, we'll find our center, and then we'll go in there and we'll drill our 3 holes there. We'll head over to the belt sander and clean up the radius, clean up the edges, round off these corners a little bit, and then we'll start working on the riser blocks. So let's go ahead and get this machined and cut. I still use my mechanical edge finder some, but this 3D Heimer is really nice. Alright, with the new shop configuration, figuring out the best place to put the camera there so y'all can see what's going on. I think we're about ready, so I moved it over my 7 1/4 inches. A 15/64 end mill is what I've got, so I need to move over half of that to get to our cut. Alright, so that's going to be 7.367. Just drilling clearance holes here for 1/4 inch bolts, and we will drill and tap the holes going up into the riser blocks. We'll bolt right on here. All right, that's half done. Let's get this spun around, and we'll get indicated in here on our other side, and we'll go do pretty much the same thing. We'll cut down most of the way with that end mill, give us a spot to cut to, and then we'll punch those 3 holes. Alright, so let's go ahead, and everything we're going to do is going to be off of the center line on this one. So let's go find our center line, and then we can cut our width, but we're going to drill our holes first since that's the RPM we've got it set for right now. So we are 7 1/4 wide, so that's going to be, alright, so 3.625 should get us to the center. Now that looks like the center, so let me re-zero us there. Okay, so we're at 3.625. And for these holes, I am looking for a size of, I believe it is 7/32. Yeah, 7/32. I like the Sharpie marks and Sharpie lines on there, especially when I'm doing something for the first time. You're doing lots of math, you're crunching lots of numbers, and sometimes it's easy to forget to be off, you know, half the diameter of a cutter or half the diameter of a drill bit or something like that, and it really just helps to keep you on track and make sure that you're lined up close enough. If you're off a whole Sharpie line, then it really makes you stop and think and double check your math and make sure you've got everything going the way that you want it to be going. Well, there is part 1 complete. Now, I need to go to Home Depot and find some hardware so we can get that bolted in place, kind of see how it is for level, make sure that when we put those riser blocks or machine those, that I don't have to put any kind of an angle on those to get it all either level or just maybe 1 degree pointed down. Go find some hardware, pick all that up, and then we can get working on those riser blocks and get those in there. And that got us to a couple. So, bottom line, that's going to be pretty easy to manipulate, move around if we have to. So we will go with flat on the blocks. So we don't have to worry about adding any angle in there. We'll machine them flat. Let's go get those blocks done. All right, first step, let's get a vise back on here so that we can work on those other pieces. All right, we got the vise on, we got it trimmed in, and I have found the edge of the corner of that vise. So we're gonna use that when we go in to drill the holes in these couple of pieces, and we're gonna be making a couple other brackets. So gonna be easy to just line it up on the edge of this vise and know where we are to get to the center of our piece and how far we need to move over for making holes. But for right now, let's get these both squared off to the right height. Really just the same height is all we're shooting for on these. All right, so these are the big holes from the bottom. So these are going to be 1/4 inch coarse holes we're going to drill and tap for in there. All right, I've got 1¼ inch screws going in here. So I need to go down about 1¼ inch to make sure I can get almost 1 inch of threads in there. Well, that's plenty to make sure we're in there straight. We'll finish tapping those by hand after. So let's get the next one in here. Alright, so these holes I want to make sure I was on here and I drill those while it's in place. We'll line it up again on this front edge, and that way I make sure I get all these holes square. I don't think they're going to be perfectly on center, so I don't have to worry about having the plate the right way around or anything else. Before we pull that vise off, I want to knock out one other part, and we'll knock out one other part and then we'll pull that vise off. We'll clamp this back to the table and we will drill our 4 holes to mount our jet on there. But I think that our risers, I think that's going to hold the jet without any trouble at all. So we're good there. The other piece I need to make, we're going to go back to the mill, drill 4 holes in a plate, and then we will go over to the lathe and we're going to make some half-round brackets, and we'll split those on the saw, mill those flat on top, and drill and tap a couple of holes in there, and that will go on the handlebars. So let's go back to the mill and let's set that up. And actually I think I'm going to make the brackets first. I don't know exactly what the width of those is going to turn out. So let's head over to the lathe. Let's make our half-round brackets, and then when we're milling those, we'll drill them, and once we've drilled those, then we will know where to drill our holes in the other flat plate. To the lathe. Okay, we've been playing with this Tormach a little bit, getting it together and built, and it is time to get back to building parts for this jet we've got to mount on a scooter. So today we're going to make, I need to mount this little plate up on the handlebars, so we're going to make a couple of half-round brackets that are going to fit around the handlebar, drill and tap some holes in there, drill and countersink some holes in this one, and we'll bolt that on the handlebars for that piece. Also, this fuel cell came in, and we're going to mount that vertically on the front handlebar post. So I need to make a couple of brackets to go around the back side of that top bar. This has some brackets that it came with, so we'll get those brackets made. And then this one is assembled. We need to get this back on the mill. We need to drill and tap our holes in here to actually mount the jet. Once we get that done, then we will figure out some mounting holes for the petcock on here for the fuel. Probably going to punch a hole, fairly large hole somewhere in the middle here where I can run some flexible conduit and run some of the wiring that we need to get back into the control center. So those are all the steps we're going to work on. But today, first, we're just going to skim the outside of this to clean it up, make it look nice. We're going to drill and bore a hole in there. I believe it's right around 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to go out and measure that real quick on the handlebars, and then we'll get that piece knocked out. Just going to make it about 3/4 of an inch wide, part it off, take it over to the bandsaw, cut it in half, and then we'll throw it in the mill and face off the tops, make them look good. Drill and tap some holes in there, and then once we're over at the mill, that's probably when we'll set this up real quick. Dial in that front piece, and then we'll punch our 4 holes in there. Get that knocked out. There it is. We'll get that split in half, faced off on the mill, drill and tap a couple of holes in there, and then we'll be good to go for mounting that. For something like this, where you're just trying to square off the edges and make them look good, I find that just using that little small level in there makes for a really quick setup and gives you pretty amazing accuracy for a part that doesn't have to be within, you know, a 10,000th of an inch or anything like that. So definitely gets it within just a couple of thou and works really quick. All right, I'm going to find this back edge of the vise right here, and I'm just going to line those up in there on that back edge, and I'm going to come over. I figured out what the width of this was, so these are 1.9 something wide. That's about 550 wide right there, so I took 1.9 minus that 550, figured out how I'm going to get my holes lined up right in the center of this piece, and then it's about 379, I think, to get centered. This is 0.758 wide. Once I touch off and find the edge, then we'll come over, we'll find our first hole right here, and 1.430 is going to be our center to center to keep them nice and centered up in here. So we'll get that done, and then we'll have our pattern to go drill our holes in the plate. We'll figure out exactly what width we want on the plate, because these obviously can move any way you want, but we'll know that it's 1.430 that way, and we should be able to use this edge, and we'll use that edge marking when we clamp our plate in here as well, and we drill all 4 holes in that. So let's get this knocked out. Alright, so we need to have 2 3/8 in between our holes widthwise. We know we got our 1.430 this way, so I just want all 4 nice and centered up on this piece. So just did the math, found out exactly where our start point is, and now we're just going to go and make a box, make our 4 holes, and after we drill them, we'll come back and countersink. Alright, I probably should have just used a center drill. I've got lots of center drills that would have cut, I think, better than those. So clearly I need to invest in a better quality countersink. Those ones are pretty dull and just not cutting consistent for me. And there we go, that will mount right there. So we should be all set with that one. Get some Velcro on that, put some Velcro on the back of the other piece, and we'll be able to stick that on there. So there's one bracket done. We're gonna make something similar for the mounts for the fuel cell, and we'll get our mount drilled now to get our jet mounted on there. And I got a new tube, so we'll fix the flat on the front tire of the scooter. Keep working along here. Alright, so I just got my drill table mounted in the vise. I don't want to take the vise off because I think we're going to need it later. Don't want to have to dial that back in. So we've got our nice flat surface here to get this set up on, get this clamped down, and we'll dial in the front of our piece. Make sure we've got it nice and square, and then we'll just punch our 4 holes, drill and tap those, and we should be set. So just got it up on some shims since it's on the bolts. Sort of eyeballed it kind of square across the back, and we'll just stick a dial on the column there, and I think that'll work for us to get that dialed in. All right, we got this one set up. This one we're going to go ahead and cut it up in millimeters just because that's what I actually have the whole pattern in millimeters for that jet. So it's 160 millimeters, 31 millimeter, 39 millimeters in between. So again, I took our overall width of these, measured those with calipers at 183.8, subtract our 160, divide that by 2, so we're going to come in 11.9 millimeters off the side, and then move over 160 for the other one. Should keep us nice and centered up on both blocks. And for the 39 millimeters, we're not going to center it up on here necessarily. I want it to be 10 millimeters in from that back edge. We want as much of the jet hanging off the back as possible, give us enough room up here to stand on. So that's the plan. So we're going to find our edge right here. We'll find these two edges, and then we'll come in 10, go over 11.9, drill our 4 holes, come back and tap those. We're going to put 3/4 inch screws in there with a washer and a lock washer. So anyway, I'm going to drill in 1 inch deep, and that should give us enough room to tap these blind holes and clear chips out of there. So we'll get them started in the mill, and I'll finish tapping those on the bench just so we can blow out and keep those clear as we work on tapping those down. So that is the plan. Or actually, I've got air here. I may just finish hand tapping them right here. We'll see how the chips blow out of those little tiny holes. But let's get this knocked out. Even I had to laugh at my mix of accuracy and measuring instruments here. Got a Machinist square measuring those holes, squaring them off the back, and then, you know, a tape measure to keep them the same length. Well, bummer. All right, so those bolts are hitting, so I'm gonna need to go in there and cut out a little clearance on those to make room for those. Gosh, it's not very much. It's about half the width of the bolt. So marked out the holes that we can drill and tap 1/4 inch to bolt on the deck, and then also kind of marked out where I'm going to need some holes for zip strips to be able to hold that conduit in place. So figured while we're pulling it off and getting it back to the mill, good time to try to get all those holes drilled before we get this all put together. So that's another zip strip hole going in the side of the block here. And then drill and tap 256, a couple of small holes. This is where I'm going to mount the petcock on there for that fuel shutoff. Just selected a ball nose end mill in here to try to give it a nice finished look, where I've got to notch these out a little bit for clearance on that other set of holes for the jet. Pretty cool looking amount of chips that piled up coming out of there, but sure did cut nice. Just putting the holes in here, we're going to be able to run that conduit. Originally I thought I was going to put conduit out the front as well, but ended up didn't need to do that. Just the conduit out the back was enough. For the wires coming down on the front, just put a little bit of that plastic wire guard over them, and I think that gives them plenty of protection that they need up there. Got these rails drilled and tapped and bolted into that battery box. Give ourselves places to mount that fuel pump and the other electronics down there in that battery hole. There is a Jet on a scooter. I think that turned out all right. Let's see how our petcock, and let's get our piece of conduit on here and see what that's going to look like. But that's going to fit on there like that. It took me a few tries to figure out how to run that conduit, so that originally I thought it was going to just come up through the middle of that back plate. And even going in along the side, it wanted to get too close to the tire, so finally just figured that coming out around the outside made the best fit, and it worked quite well. Just kept playing with it till I found a good place to run it. Alright, last major component we need to make here is we need to make the brackets to mount this fuel cell on that front bar. This is basically what we're going to go make. Just again, kind of a horseshoe bracket, fit around the back of the bar. We'll drill and tap over here, and that will mount onto these clamps around that front bar. So I've got this big chunk of aluminum. It's wide enough. I'm going to get both of them out of here. So we're going to make one, and then we'll just take the bandsaw, split this in half, and then we'll set it in the mill and just clean up each side a little bit so that it looks good. So my plan is I'm just gonna actually grab this in my, trying to decide if I want to just bore it in the mill or if I was gonna grab it in the forejaw. Don't have a good way to drill it out very fast or big on the mill, so just would take a whole lot longer. So yeah, it's gonna be a little bit offset, but gonna mark the hole and we're just gonna offset it in the forejaw chuck. We'll drill that out, we'll bore it out to our 1.275 diameter. I'll probably come down just a little bit extra so that my fourth jaw actually has a place to go because the hole isn't going to be off the end. So we'll come down a little bit extra, drill, bore that, and then we'll go take it over to the mill. We'll face the top of this off, and then we'll also cut the flats out of that to make that hole extend straight up. So we'll do that in the mill, and then we'll have a nice flat surface to work from. We should be done, and then we'll trace our design on here. We'll take that over to the bandsaw, we'll cut it out, we'll clean up that edge so that it looks good, and then we'll tip it up, take it back to the bandsaw, split it in half, and then we'll take it back to the mill and face off both sides. Let's get the hole marked on here. So halfway down for that hole would be 0.6, let's see, 1.275. Yeah, so 637 would be halfway down, and I'm going to go ahead and come down, yeah, a little more than 7/8 of an inch is where I'll center punch my hole on there, and then we'll use our dead center to dial that in on the forejaw. I think that'll give me a little over 1/8 of an inch up there. I'll just make sure that I don't tighten that jaw very tight so that as I drill and bore through that, it's not trying to push that little piece over because it's going to get a little bit thin there. Let's go ahead and get this marked. We'll get the forejaw on. We'll get this knocked out. Okay, I tried to do it in one cut, so I basically went off of that drilled hole. I mean, we've got plus or minus, well, not minus, but plus an extra 5 thou is fine on this. It's just clearance over the tube. So I tried to take one cut. Pretty impressed with the finish that we got in there on that aluminum going that slow. Let's see how we did. Yeah, I'm going for 275, and we got about 278. We got about plus 3 there. We are good to go with that. So now let's get this over to the mill, and yeah, we're going to waste a little bit of material here, but for the amount of speed we gained by boring this in the lathe, grabbing it there, just going to take the face mill, knock this off down to the height that we need. That'll square off our top, get that knocked back to where we need to, and then we'll cut out our shape, cut it in half. All right, let's head over to the mill. To square up my notch in here, I measured from the center line of the hole over to the edge, and then I lined up on my edge. I moved over that amount plus half the width of my cutter, so I should be lined up right on that edge now of my hole. So we'll go into that spot, and then we'll move over the width of the hole minus the diameter of my cutter, and we'll go clean up the other edge. So right now what I need to do is just kind of guesstimate and get this cutting edge lined up on my center line of my hole. So we'll just eyeball that a little bit, and then we'll get in there and we'll work our way over towards the edge, see if our numbers are matching up. Okay, yeah, I would say that is pretty good. Boy, it's sure an optical illusion trying to look at that, so I'm glad I wasn't trying to do that by eye. Measuring from the end worked great. So now we've got our bracket. Let's get this off here. Let's deburr a little bit. We'll go drop it in the bandsaw, split it in half, and bring it back over here and face off those sides. Clean up our bandsaw cut a little bit, get this looking nice, and then we'll drill and tap it, and our brackets will be done. Yeah, that turned out very nice looking. So now we're going to lay out our pattern on here, cut that out on the bandsaw, and then we will flip it onto this nice flat surface, split it in half, take it back over and clean up the faces a little bit. Or actually, after we cut this contour, we're going to grind this and clean it up really nice. Get that done, then we'll split it, and then we'll go face the sides. Alright, I just checked the contour on my bigger grinding wheel, and if I go just a little bit flatter like that, it'll actually make it a lot easier to grind and clean up over there. So I'm going to follow a little bit more along that line, and it'll make it a lot easier to grind it up rather than having to use this other one. Well, it should have been easy, but it took me a couple of tries with that marking gauge to get that line scribed on there straight as I wanted to. Kept coming off a little bit on the edges and just rounding off a little bit. So finally got it where I wanted it. And then there were two. Had those within 25 thou when I split them with the bandsaw. Only took a 25 thou cleanup cut on each side and no problem getting rid of all my saw marks and everything. So worked out well. All right, time to put those brackets to work and get this tank mounted. So first off, we'll get a fitting in the bottom here. There it is. We have fuel, jet, everything mounted. Let's get this last sensor mounted up here on the handlebars. So we've got our mounting bracket up top for the screen to see what's going on, your status screen. Made these brackets down here for this fuel cell mount. I think those turned out pretty well. And then obviously we've got the full mount back here for the jet. Did a little cutaway on the base so that we could get that in there. And then if I pull those two screws out underneath the base, we've got room to mount a couple of components. But like I say, this cable isn't long enough to run through underneath to those components. Some of the other wires coming out of this control, so mainly this one. So I've got two main wires that go out of that to the jet, and neither of those are long enough. So need to get those long enough, and then I'll be able to mount the pump underneath and get that done. We'll see what's going on, but I think we're pretty close. everything is fitting in here. Again, this wire will go through the conduit, so it's just sort of truly an extra right now. And I think that will leave enough room for everything else to operate. So this appears to be the main power, so plenty of room. You can run that off the battery. A couple different places you can go with that to plug that in. So that's all in there. Well, that made it a lot neater already. Couple wires to figure out, an expert to run the Jet. Yeah, this thing is just about ready to run. Okay, prime vape.
Yep.
Burner on.
Burner on.
Got your ears in?
Stage one. Running.
Okay. Hey, well, YouTube, that's a wrap on another project here in the BladesIIB workshop. Hope you enjoyed watching the work on that Jet scooter as much as I enjoyed putting that together. Truly one of the funnest projects I've worked on in a while. Got to work on prototyping, being innovative, creative, just pretty much everything I think most of us get out in the shop and want to work on a regular basis. So good challenges in that project, and it was pretty fun. I think, as you can see in there, my action photography probably needs a little bit of work. I will tell you, it was a lot more fun to ride, and it sure felt like you're going a lot faster than it may look in those videos. But also, if you've subscribed to the channel, hey, I sure appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed yet, now would be a great time, because I can tell you that that scooter has already been in for some upgrades. We took care of the throttle on there. You can see in the video that trying to manage that throttle where it's just the whole transmitter hanging down like that, that is what made it so challenging to try and ride. So we have fixed the throttle, worked on a couple of other upgrades on that scooter. So you're going to want to hit that subscribe button and know when that video comes out. Really just a lot been going on here in the BladesIIB shop. We've been working on the Tormach 1100 MX, We use that to work on some of the upgrades for the scooter. Got another video coming out soon with some knife parts, so I have been able to get a couple of knife parts out on the Tormach. Lots going on here in addition to just getting a little trim on the beard. Yeah, definitely staying busy here in the BladesIIB shop. Appreciate you watching. Like I say, hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, hope you're out in your own shop working on some projects of your own. Whether or not it's a jet scooter, hey, I'm sure you're out there having some fun and working on something that you enjoy doing. So we'll be working on our next video here, and until next time, take care.